And let's start with US news, where amid a raging debate over immigrants' rights in US, nearly 24 major companies in tech and other industries are planning to launch a coalition to demand legislation that would allow young illegal immigrants a path to permanent residency. Reports say Coalition for the American Dream intends to ask Congress to pass bipartisan legislation this year that would allow these immigrants, often referred to as dreamers, to continue working in the US. Alphabet's Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Intel, Uber Technologies, IBM, Marriott and other top US companies are listed as members of this lobbying group. The push for this legislation comes after President Trump's September decision to allow deferred action for childhood arrivals or DACA program to expire in March. That program, established by former President Barack Obama in 2012, allows approximately 900,000 illegal immigrants to obtain working permits in the US. And at a time when Kobe's steel crisis has hit Japan, one of major car players, Nissan, will halt all car production at its Japanese plants for 2 weeks to address issues with final inspection lines. It was revealed that at some plants, final inspections were performed by employees who were not certified to carry them out. The final inspection lines are the last quality control measures that completed vehicles go through on the assembly line. And Nissan's admission that between January 14 and September 17, this process was given to employees not certified to perform the task. It has sparked a planned recall of 1.16 million cars in Japan. The Japanese Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transportation notified Nissan that in the final vehicle inspection process, certain checks were carried out by technicians not properly registered to perform those duties under Nissan's own processes. Kobe steel crisis has sparked fear among automakers. The Car News Japanese metal supplier faked material strength data, sparking automakers' fears. A leading Japanese steel producer announced early this week that it had failed the data, falsified data, in fact, linked to strength and durability of aluminum and copper pieces. And staying with Auto World, where in the signs of continuing struggles for Mercedes parent Daimler, third quarter operating profit of German auto major has declined. The cost of making diesel engine cars run cleaner and other special items has also outweighed record sales of Mercedes-Benz luxury models. While earnings before interest and tax, EBIT, at the German automotive group Daimler has plunged 14% to $4.08 billion in the July to September period. Daimler last quarter spent $225 million to update over 3 million current and older Mercedes diesel models in Europe to curb pollution and help avert driving bans. Now, a recall of more than 1 million passenger cars and SUVs worldwide to address potential unintended airbag deployment announced this week will add another $230 million in cost. The cars and trucks manufacturer stuck with its guidance for a significant increase in group EBITDA this year. It said it now expected EBIT at its truck division to also significantly exceed year-o levels, having previously guided for flat EBIT. Daimler said it expects EBIT at its financial services division to significantly beat year-earlier levels. And Zimbabwe's economy is in crisis. Local grocery shops are running out of stock, and restrictions on bank withdrawal is making citizens angry, raising the scrutiny against country's President Robert Mugabe. Here is a report.
Zimbabweans are once again spending countless hours queuing at shops, garages and banks, hoping to collect just enough to get by. In recent weeks, there have been fewer grocery items and fuel in stock, on top of existing limitations on how much money a person can withdraw weekly. These restrictions have resulted in businesses feeling the pinch.
Business is not that good. It's getting worse because people are getting $50 per week. And most of this money is then used to pay their rent, and they will be left with no money to come and buy goods from here.
Panic buying and stockpiling have been triggered by a lack of confidence in bond notes, a parallel currency launched by the government nearly a year ago. In theory, it is worth the same as the US dollar, but Zimbabweans fear it could become worthless.
It's largely a problem of confidence within the market. And probably, even as we approach elections, I think the uncertainties will remain. They may even increase political uncertainties of what may happen, even economic uncertainties in terms of the direction of economic policies. Is government going to print more bond notes? So all that will further erode confidence in the system, which could exacerbate the situation.
Mugabe, whose land policies are widely blamed for Zimbabwe's economic collapse since 2000, riled against what he called currency saboteurs and vowed the price hikes would be dealt with.
There are those who are eager to manipulate the currency so that they can trigger inflation, cause panic, buying.
Fears are mounting that the situation could deteriorate back to the levels of 2008-2009, when inflation peaked at 5 billion% before the national currency was abandoned and the economy never recovered.
And at a time when the hard negotiations between UK and European Union are going on, the PM of UK, Theresa May, has got support from German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who has sent a positive signal to Theresa May on Brexit talks. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Britain's Prime Minister May met each other yesterday for a roundtable meeting in Brussels, Belgium, which is EU's headquarters. German Chancellor Merkel offered one of her most positive assessments of Brexit talks, and she believed to have negotiated between EU and Britain. She said they were moving forward and dismissing the prospect of a breakdown. And earlier, UK Prime Minister Theresa May tried to accelerate Brexit talks, but her European counterparts want to know how much EU citizens living in Britain will pay to exit the bloc. Now, speaking at the summit, May reaffirmed Britain's commitment to the rights of European citizens living in the UK.
The UK and the EU share the same objective of safeguarding the rights of EU nationals living in the UK and UK nationals living in the EU. EU citizens have made a huge contribution to our country, and let me be clear that whatever happens, we want them and their families to stay. Nobody need be concerned for the current budget plan that they would have to either pay in more or receive less as a result of the UK leaving, and that we will honour the commitments that we have made during our membership. Now, there has to be detailed work on those commitments, as David Davis has said. We're going through them line by line, and we'll continue to go through them line by line.
And with just 17 months left before Britain is due to leave EU, Prime Minister May tried to shift the focus away from a failure to push the talks beyond discussion of a divorce settlement.
Of course, we'll also be looking at the concrete progress that's been made in our exit negotiations and looking at setting out ambitious plans for the weeks ahead. I particularly, for example, want to see an urgency in reaching an agreement on citizens' rights.
And EU leaders said there was more work to be done. German Chancellor Angela Merkel described some encouraging signs that could help pave the way for discussion on future trade ties at the next EU summit in December.
Und jetzt müssen sich beide Seiten bewegen. Wir müssen sagen, was sind unsere Schlussfolgerungen, wenn Großbritannien diese Partnerschaft will oder jene Partnerschaft. Aber darüber sind wir uns auch noch nicht abschließend klar. Aber das wird geschehen und das wird auch in der notwendigen Zeit geschehen. Und wir alle wissen, wann der Endpunkt dieser Verhandlungen ist. Aber ich will eindeutig ein Abkommen und nicht irgendeine unvorhersehbare Lösung. Und daran arbeiten wir sehr intensiv.
And to talk more on this, we are joined by London Bureau Chief Mandy Clark. Good evening to you, Mandy. And first of all, I would like to ask you, how do you see these developments happening? And is UK far or near from having easy negotiations as far as EU is concerned? What is the way forward?
Well, you know, Theresa May will take this as a victory. The big worry is that there would be no deal, and that would be terrible for Britain. It would be bad for the EU, but certainly it would be more devastating for Britain. So the fact that Angela Merkel, who is by far the powerhouse in that negotiating team, did say that she sees positive steps ahead, that she did indicate that more had to be put on offer, but that she felt that they would reach their timeline. So it doesn't look like they'll be ready to talk trade in October, but there has been speculation that December they might have ironed through those major wrinkles, which is the land border with Ireland, the rights of those EU citizens, and the divorce bill, how much Britain will pay to leave the EU. So it seems that they're moving closer to those key issues before, hopefully, they can talk trade before the new year.
And Mandy, over time and over again, the overall UK, the Brexit bill has been slated to be around $40 to $50 billion. That is huge cost for UK as far as Brexit negotiations are concerned. So any estimate you can put to what kind of Brexit bill UK is facing, and will it be easier for UK now to pay that bill?
I'm not going to put a guess on it, but you're right. Those are the numbers we've been hearing. What's really interesting, a top German diplomat, MP, who's very close to Angela Merkel, said he understood Theresa May's position, that any numbers she puts forward, Boris Johnson will say it's too much. So even Europe recognizes there's a lot of infighting inside the ruling Tory party here in Britain, and they see that the difficulty Theresa May faced. In fact, Theresa May apparently said in her closed-door speech to the group, "Help me find a deal that would be acceptable to the British people." So she's really calling on them to work as a team to find an agreement that would work for everyone. But certainly that's the figure that we're hearing. And a lot of that figure that, according to EU diplomats, are money that had already been pledged or earmarked for projects going ahead, is not necessarily the total settlement. So the number we shall see, we've heard numbers up to 100 billion. I think that's a bit high. I think we're looking more at 40 to 50.
One last question to you before we let you go, Mandy. What is the situation on ground? You must have spoken to certain corporates, individuals, and even somebody in government departments. So what is the situation on ground? How concerned are the corporates? Because the path to negotiations is still not clear.
It's not good, I'm afraid. One of a major bank has just announced that it's moving its headquarters to Frankfurt, and this is what London feared the most, that it would start losing its financial clout, where big banks and financial institutions will just feel there's too much uncertainty in London and take their chance and relocate on the continent. And we're seeing that with one major bank. It's a big blow to the City of London, which is the financial center. And the more that one bank is willing to do it, the worry is that's going to open those floodgates where more and more businesses will bleed out into Europe, where they know the rules and the likelihood that it will stay stable, because Britain is just not providing the certainty that is promised.
And let's move over to India's stories, where the festival season may not be as good as expected for the car makers, but two-wheeler makers have registered brisk sales in the festival season. India's largest two-wheeler maker, Hero MotoCorp, has set a new global record with more than 3 lakh retail sales in a single day on Dhanteras. Hero Moto also recently surpassed 75 million units of two-wheelers in cumulative sales since its inception. In September this year, it became the only two-wheeler company to sell over 7 lakh two-wheelers in a month too. But on the other hand, the car makers, they were not as lucky as two-wheeler players, and they have recorded not as good a growth as far as sales are concerned on the day of Dhanteras and festival season. And worrying that rising consumer prices will threaten Indian Central Bank's inflation target of 4%, led the majority of RBI, which is India's Central Bank Monetary Policy Committee, to vote to keep rates steady. Now, according to minutes issued, committee members also said at their October 4 meeting, they expected that a slowdown in economic growth will be lowest in more than 3 years. in the April-June quarter. This could prove transitory, and it was prudent for waiting for more evidence. RBI's 6-member Monetary Policy Committee voted 5-1 to keep the repo rate unchanged at the October 4 meeting after inflation in August surged to 3.36% from a year earlier, not far off from central bank's 4% target. However, data after the meeting showed inflation held steady at 3.28% in September, in line with the downwardly revised number for August. Now, although analysts say they expected repo rate to remain unchanged for now. And a day after British Petroleum was offered to take control of Kurdish pipeline, Russian energy major Rosneft has now agreed to take control of main oil pipelines in Iraq's Kurdistan region. Well, this has further boosted Rosneft's role as the main international investor in semi-autonomous region. Rosneft said its share in the project may total as much as 60%, while the current pipeline operator KAR Group will retain 40%. Sources familiar with the deal said Rosneft's investment in project was seen totaling about $1.8 billion. The deal comes days after Baghdad threatened to reroute a big chunk of oil flows towards an old oil pipeline which has been out of operation for several years since Kurdistan built its own infrastructure to Turkish Mediterranean port of Shihan. The main lifters of the oil are trading houses Vitol, Petraco, Glencore, and most recently Rosneft via pre-financing deals. Rosneft's influential CEO Igor Shishin said that Turkish authorities and Baghdad have to resolve their differences by themselves. Now, Iraq, along with neighboring Iran and Turkey, has pledged to isolate Kurdistan in the wake of last month's referendum that includes cutting off air and banking ties and reviving an old pipeline to Turkey to deprive Erbil of a big chunk of oil revenues. Rosneft has already invested $400 million in 5 oil blocks in Iraqi Kurdistan. It also had previously loaned Kurdistan a $1.2 billion guaranteed by oil sales and is seeking to help Erbil build 2 major oil and gas pipelines. And with an aim to keep oil prices steady, oil producers are working to build consensus on extending their deal to reduce supplies with the potential for continuation throughout 2018, forming a basis for talks. OPEC, the organization of petroleum exporting countries plus Russia and 9 other producers, are cutting oil output by about 1.8 million barrels per day or BPD until March 2018 in an attempt to eradicate a supply glut that has weighed on prices. The deal has supported prices which are trading within sight of a 2-year high, but an overhang of stored oil has yet to be fully eradicated, and producers are considering extending the deal at their next meeting on November 30. Reports said producers are leaning towards extending the deal for a further 9 months, though the decision could be postponed until early next year, depending on the market. Oil prices trading above $57 are half their level of mid-2014, prompting energy companies to cut back on exploration and producers to curb production. Markets in India are closed, but global markets, they are open. And if we talk about Asia, the markets over there, let's see how are they doing currently. And markets, if we talk about Asian markets, European markets are all in green. If we talk about some other markets, we can say that Asia, the markets are trading mixed as far as the markets are concerned. Nikkei of Japan is up, State Times up, Hang Seng of Hong Kong is also up, though Taiwan is down and Kospi of Korea is also trading flat. So global markets, Asian markets are trading mixed. In Europe, all three markets, FTSE of London, CAC of France and DAX of Germany, all are trading in green. Well, that's all today we have in this edition of WION Wallet. For more news and updates, stay tuned to WION, and thanks for watching us.
WION Wallet.